Pat came over from Ireland to England with his wife 1 year to find work. He got quite a good job with a building company, and as he did not drink or smoke, he saved up quite a lot of money. His wife's parents were still in Ireland, and one day she got a telegram to say that her mother was ill, so Pat saved her some money and she went to Ireland to see her. After a week, Pat wanted to write a letter to her, but he could not read or write very well, so he went to his priest and asked him to do it for him. Pat told the priest what he wanted to say, and the priest wrote it down. After a few minutes, Pat stopped, and the priest said, "Do you want to say any more? Only please excuse the bad writing and the spelling," Pat said. Harry came to his mother one morning while she was having her breakfast and said to her, "No one at my school likes me, Mother. The teachers don't, and the children don't. Even the cleaners and the bus drivers hate me." "Well, Harry," his mother answered, "perhaps you aren't very nice to them. If a few people don't like a person, he or she may not be responsible for that. But if a lot of people don't, there's usually something wrong, and that person really needs to change." "I'm too old to change," Harry said. "I don't want to go to school." "Don't be silly, Harry," his mother said, going towards the garage to get the car out. "You have to go. You're quite well, and you still have a lot of things to learn. And besides that, you're the headmaster of the school." Mr. and Mrs. Davis had 4 children. One Saturday, Mrs. Davis said to her husband, "The children haven't got any lessons today, and you're free too. There is a fun fair in the park. Let's all go." Her husband was doubtful about this. "I want to finish some work," he said. "Oh, forget about that and come to the fair," his wife said. So Mr. and Mrs. Davis took the children to the fun fair. Mr. Davis was 45 years old, but he enjoyed the fun fair more than the children. He hurried from one thing to another and ate lots of sweets and nuts. One of the children said to her mother, "Daddy's behaving just like a small child. Isn't he, Mommy?" Mrs. Davis was quite tired of following her husband around by now, and she answered, "He's worse than a small child, Mary, because he's got his own money." Miss Harry's husband died when she was 45 years old. She had a son who was 80 years old at that time. Mrs. Harris was not a widow for very long. She met a nice man who was a few years older than she was. And 2 years after her first husband had died, she married for the second time. Her son Peter was 20 years old then. Mrs. Harris had a nice, quiet wedding in the village church. After that, they had the usual party at her house for her family and her new husbands and for some of their friends. But Peter was very late for the party. At last, he hurried in, kissed his mother, and said, "I'm sorry I'm late, Mom, but I have been looking everywhere for a card which said to my mother for her wedding, and I haven't been able to find one." Mr. and Mrs. Taylor had one child. He was a boy. He was 7 years old, and his name was Pat. Now, Mrs. Taylor was expecting another child. Pat had seen babies in other people's houses and had not liked them very much, so he was not delighted about the news that there was soon going to be one in his house too. One evening, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor were making plans for the baby's arrival. This house won't be big enough for us all when the baby comes. I suppose we'll have to find a larger house and move to that, said Mr. Taylor finally. Pat had been playing outside, but he came into the room just then and said, "What are you talking about?" "We were saying that we'll have to move to another house now because the new baby's coming," his mother answered. "It's no use," said Pat hopelessly. "He'll follow us there." Jim was intelligent, but he hated hard work. He said, "You work hard and earn a lot of money, and then the government takes most of it. I want easy work that gives me lots of money and that the government doesn't know about." So he became a thief, but he did not do the stealing. He got others to do it. They were much less intelligent than he was, so he arranged everything and told them what to do. One day, they were looking for rich families to rob, and Jim sent one of them to a large, beautiful house just outside the town. It was evening, and when the man looked through one of the windows, he saw a young man and a girl playing a duet on a piano. When he went back to Jim, he said that family can't have much money. Two people were playing on the same piano there. In England, nobody under the age of 18 is allowed to drink in a public bar. Mr. Thompson used to go to a bar near his house quite often, but he never took his son, Tom, because he was too young. Then when Tom had his 18th birthday, Mr. Thompson took him to his usual bar for the first time. They drank for half an hour, and then Mr. Thompson said to his son, "Now, Tom, I want to teach you a usual lesson. You must always be careful not to drink too much. And how do you know when you have had enough? Well, I tell you. Do you see those two lights at the end of the bar? When they seem to have become four, you have had enough and you should go home." "But, Dad," said Tom, "I can't only see one light at the end of the bar."